In today's video, I'm hiking 20 miles deep into the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest to teach you my favorite composition and camera techniques for forest and stream photography. You'll learn how I look for compositions in the field, how to find the best light, the optimal camera settings for long exposure photography, how to achieve sharp focus, plus composition tips for forest and stream photography that I use for every single shoot. So I got up about 2 hours ago to check the sunrise conditions, about an hour before sunrise, and completely clear again. So I got to sleep in for another hour and a half and then just made some coffee and relaxing. We're waiting for this sun to swing down and hit the tents because there's frost on everything. Got down to 29 last night. I have a little temperature thermometer thing. It's called a Govee. I just hang it up on this pole and then it connects through Bluetooth. Only weighs 0.78 ounces and it's really nice for dialing your layering system in because you can guess what you need for a trip and then you can see what the minimum temperature is at night, and then on the next trip you can kind of add or subtract layering for those specific temperature ranges. Back on the trail, been hiking about 2 miles, and this whole section the river turns like a neon blue color and the lighting is absolutely perfect. So I've been scouting around as I walk by looking for good spots where there's nice soft light. What I mean by soft light, look how the lighting hits this moss. It's not too bright, so you can still see all the color and detail. If you get lighting that's really harsh, let me see, like right in there, super harsh lighting, you don't want that. So I've been watching the river. I want the river to get dappled with light so there's no really bright spots on it. And then the moss is all soft light around it, so somewhere like that. But I'm ideally looking for colors just like this. So hopefully I'll be able to find some sections with some nice rapids. That's another thing I always look for when I'm looking for spots to shoot on the river. You want a lot of rapid action. And then if there's gonna be rocks out in the river, look for rocks that might have moss on them or some other detail that'll kind of bring the composition together. Man, this forest is absolutely ideal for shooting. So I'm always just trying to visualize from the trail what the composition might be. See how that's really contrasted? It's super dark and super light, kind of some hot spots in there. Those are really hard to expose for. So as you shoot more and more forest and stream photography, you'll do a lot of shooting and realize the problems you run into while you're shooting. And then you can just update your algorithm on spots that'll be good to shoot and that won't be good to shoot. And then it gets a lot easier. I used to struggle a lot with forest and stream photography, but now that I've done it for a while, I actually don't need to bust my camera out to know what's gonna work or not. I can just look down at the river and know what might be a potentially good composition or not. So hopefully I'll be able to find something along this neon blue stretch. So I'm about 4 miles into the hike. Hopefully you guys can hear me. It's so loud down here. Ridiculous spot. Blue water, green, moss everywhere. Huge old growth trees. There's moss hanging down from all the trees. Man, what a good spot to shoot. I was just working on this composition right here. See, I have set up on the screen right there. Now what I really like about this one is all this moss down here in the foreground. So that moss is gonna act as a leading line on both sides. So it just shoots the eyes into the middle of the scene and then it's gonna catch this blue water. Now what I wanna do here is I wanna work on the shutter speed of this water down here to move the eyes back up through the scene. The only thing I've been running into as far as problems is the sun keeps coming down and lighting up that water a little bit too brightly, but it looks like it's perfect right now. So let's get some shots off before it changes. So for this one, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna focus and take care of all the image except this immediate foreground. So I'll just focus the approximate hyperfocal right here. And you guys can download all my camera tech PDFs down below this video. They cover all my step-by-step process for shooting if you're a little confused about it. I also have lots of other good videos on this stuff. So focus there, pull up my histogram. See, it's touching the right there, it's hanging off. And you can see where those water right there is blowing out a little bit. So I'm going to darken this back down. Keeping an eye on that water right there. I want to make sure that's not blown out. If you're ever shooting bright water like this, back your histogram way over to the left to make sure there's no spots hanging off the edge that you can't see, because sometimes they'll hide over there. And then you can start bringing it up until it's touching. So somewhere right in there. Now, aperture priority mode, F11, I think that'll work well for this one. It kicks out 1/6 of a second. I think that's actually perfect for this exposure I want, because I want some nice detail in this water. So let's fire a few off here before that sun comes back too bright. Oh, that's really nice. Look at that water detail flowing down through there. I like that a lot. Then I'm just checking for the bright spots. I'm always checking where that sun's hitting. That's going to be the brightest trouble spot, and I want to make sure I have all the detail. So sometimes when you're shooting really bright spots like that, it won't show it's blown out on the histogram, but you'll actually start to lose detail in the water. So something to keep an eye on. So let's work this shutter speed a little bit. Let's go up in ISO, get a little faster shutter speed while the sun's still perfect here. I want to make sure I take advantage of this so I don't have to wait again. All right, so that's a little faster shutter speed. Once I'm done shooting, we'll look at all these, because I want to knock it out real quick while the lighting is just absolutely perfect. Look at that awesome dappled light just hitting these rocks right here and here. I'm hoping I'll get some dappled light right on my foreground there as well. All right, so that looks good. Let's drop the f-stop to f8. That's going to give us an even faster shutter speed. I'm just leaving my focal point in place because I want to be able to combine these really easy in post-processing. And if I change my focal point, it's going to change the actual image just slightly and they won't overlap. I really like that fast shutter speed, especially for this water right in here. I'm just checking to make sure I have good detail in that water. That looks perfect. So let's take one and go back. I want to make sure I have a bunch of different variations of this so I can mix them together. Go back to base ISO. That's once again 1/5 of a second. Now I have 3 different variations there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the foreground. Right down in this foreground. I'm going to have to refocus for that. So that will shift the image slightly. But that's okay. I can easily fix that in post-processing. Good thing I nailed it, because now that sun's coming through. So I'm going to focus right here where the image starts to drop off. Back button focus. I'm going to go with F16 for these. Remember, none of this background stuff matters anymore. I'm just visualizing the focus I want in the foreground here. So I'm going to go up just slightly in exposure now, just so I can have nice exposure in this foreground. That gives me 1/1.3. I'm always scanning the image and saying, do I care about shutter speed down here? Well, I did there, so I controlled it. I don't here because nothing's moving, and I'm not worried about that water anymore. So let's capture that one. And then I want to take a look at this moss, and I want to see where it drops off. So if I scan around, I can see that since it's so close to the front of my camera, look how close the camera is to that moss. This is the start of the composition. And I can see right about here it starts to drop off. So I'm just going to put another focal point right there where it drops off, and you can see that it's dropped off. Bring it back a little bit, back button focus, and I'll capture another one, both at f16 base ISO. So let's look at this one. That's nice and sharp all the way up to that rock right here, but it drops off in the immediate foreground right there. So that's where that other one will cover me, because that one's sharp all the way down there. So now we have a bunch of different exposures here. We have these nice water movement ones. I love that light hitting right there as that comes down. We have nice water movement there, and then I like this one with the really fast water movement at 1/25 of a second. And then when I'm looking at these, I actually like some really long exposure right down in there now that I'm thinking about it. So I could actually just re-drop my focal point. And usually I want to do all the water first, but thinking through it now that I've been shooting, if you see something you want to fix, there's no better time to do it. So I need to get this exposure really long just for that water in there, and if I get the exposure long, you'll be able to see through to the bottom. So f22 ISO 100, that gives me 1.6 seconds. We'll just compare and contrast that. Yeah, see how you can see the bottom water detail when you extend that exposure out? So now we have all different water movements down there in the foreground. And the way I got that idea is I was taking the shot that was focus stacked in the foreground, and the exposure was a little bit longer and it looked cool. And I didn't think about that beforehand, so I'll add it back in. So just keep an eye on this and remember what you're shooting. Ideally, you want to shoot all the water stuff first and then work back to the focus stacking stuff second. That's what I usually do, just so I'll remember the direction or order of operations. All right, so looking at this, I'm gonna remind myself that that was for this one. What I'll do is I'm just gonna poke my finger like this for that area to remind myself that it was for that water, because it was out of sequence. So I'll just point right there, and then I'll remember that one. What I also like to do for these is I just point my finger at both ends of the image set, and then it's really easy to remember when I get back home and organize them. So usually when you're shooting scenes like this, things to keep in mind. Always set up the composition first. I'm just holding it handheld when I set up this composition. Once you have the composition set up, talk with yourself through the shots you want to capture and what order you want to capture them in. Then you're never guessing while you're on the move for that shot. You should always have a visualization of what you need to capture for the image. You need to capture shutter speed variations, you need to focus stack, and then there's other things that might matter, like this sun coming down through here and hitting there. I need to keep an eye out for that. So I was sitting here waiting for 15 minutes until that sun got perfect, and now it's all good to go. So let's take a look at these raw files that I captured, and I'll also give you some really good forest photography tips. So the number one thing for forest photography, look around my image here and you'll see there's no white sky spots peeking through. So a lot of times when people shoot in the forest, they'll have this big blotch of sky that peeks through, and it can be really distracting. Blue against green and yellow also looks really bad. So notice how I composed this so there's no big pieces of sky sticking through. There's just forest up here in the top. I also used the leading lines of these branches to push down into the middle of the photo. So if you start around the outside here, you're looking down this way. Same with these leading lines. They're going to push down into this part of the photo. And then in the bottom of the photo, I have the foreground, which I captured at different focal point right here. And that's going to grab the eyes here and shoot them into this part of the photo. So have things that are interesting around the outsides of the photo that grab your eyes and push them into the center of attention, which is all the water movement right here. A good thing that I call this is the interestingness grid. So if you divide your photo up into horizontal thirds and vertical thirds, you'll have 9 boxes. You guys can check out my 5 composition secrets you never heard of video. You'll have these 9 boxes, and you want to fill each of them with something new and interesting. So if you have these boxes across the top, 1, 2, 3, you can just visualize them. They don't have to be perfect. You'll have something different in each of them. In the middle, if I have those 3 boxes across the middle, something new and interesting. In the bottom, same 3 boxes, something new and interesting. It doesn't have to be mind-blowing interesting. You just don't want the same thing to repeat again and again and again in separate parts of your photo. It just becomes boring and people will stop looking at it. The other thing you can use to move the eyes around the photo is movement. So I took these different shutter speeds. The first one I have is a half a second here. I'm going to use that for the flowing water back here in the background. It's going to move the eyes out of this corner down into the center of the scene. And then for this one, I'm going to use this faster shutter speed. This was a 1/13 of a second. And you can really see all the fine water detail here. This is really nice for rapids. And then you can control it however you need to, just making sure you didn't blow out any of the finer details in the highlights. You can see I captured it perfectly for that one. Then this next one, I just refocused down here in the bottom of the photo, and I'm going to focus stack these and blend them together. You guys can check out my focus stacking video for that. And that will bring detail to the foreground here, and I can bring all of those together to get my final image. So working together with different composition tips, and then looking for things in the field that are too bright as well. So see how this is blown out right here? But if I darken it down, you can see it's actually not blown out in the raw file, and then you can control it. So you got to get really good at exposure in the field, because if you actually blew this out, notice how this color of yellow, even though it's not technically blown out as far as clipping, as soon as bright colors such as yellow get a little bit brighter than 90th percentile of pure white on the histogram, they're going to start to lose their detail. So you can see it holds detail until right about in here, and the greens are barely getting up here, but it's starting to lose detail already. So keep an eye out for things like that and make sure you're correctly exposed so you have all the detail in those hot spots. The other thing to look for is water. When you're looking and shooting water, you want to make sure that the brightest parts of the water always have full detail and you're not blowing them out. So on your raw files, get used to exposing to the right. You can check out my Dave Morrow ETTR video on YouTube on my channel, and you want to expose to the right so you don't blow anything out while still maintaining all the dark detail.
So it is 5 o'clock and I hiked 10 miles today. Just got to camp, got everything set up, and I just finished recording a gear video for all the gear that I took out on this trip, which I'll publish in next week's video. But give you guys a quick tour around camp. This is a beautiful one. Same river that I've been hiking on this whole time. Runs that way about 20 miles and then hits the Pacific Ocean. Got my tarp set up. Last night I had this folded over because it was pretty cold and it'll keep the warmth in, but it's a lot warmer down here at 1,000-foot elevation, so I just have it set up like that. Just gives a little wind protection and it keeps the dew off you at night. And then I'm just out in the middle, nowhere in this old growth forest. We'll go over and look at this part of camp, but they also have a fire ring here and somebody was nice enough to leave me some wood. So I'll just have to collect a bunch of these little pieces of wood and get a good fire ripping tonight. I actually think I might prefer this fire spot. What do you guys think? That one's solid because it's got river views. That one's got the tree views. I don't know. I'm gonna have to eat dinner, think about it. But man, this has been such a fun trip so far. And tomorrow I got about 6 more miles to hike out and then drive back home, reset, and start preparing for the next trip.